Oh, who's introducing me?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, we are live.
Welcome to the Financial Health for Tribal Producers webinar series. This is the first of a few of them. Today we're going to be doing Managing Your Money, Part 1 and 2. We're going to start with building a strong foundation, and then in the next hour we are going to go on with the My5 Assist, which is a financial assistant app that can help look at loan payments and other types of things. So this is sponsored by the Western Extension Risk Management Education, and they are under USDA NIFA. And so the project team is myself, Ruby Ward from Utah State University. We have Trent Tegerstrom, the Associate Director of Tribal Extension from the University of Arizona, Vicki Hebb from the University of Nevada, Reno, and Juan Arias, University of Arizona. And this is a partnership between the various universities. So I'm going to turn it over to Trent Tegerstrom, and he's going to start doing the presentation for us. If you have questions, please put those into the chat, and we will be monitoring that and asking the questions as we go along. Trent.
No, thanks, Ruby. So yeah, like Ruby said, this is the start of building a strong foundation or a base and getting things lined out ahead of time. So, and Vicki and I will be going back and forth as a team as we go through a lot of these slides, just having a conversation about these things to discuss them, make sure we cover the points we need to cover that are critical as you're moving forward on a lot of this stuff. So this first one, what we're looking at is just this checklist, this pre-personal business checklist, because we want you to start off on the right foot to get things going, have this strong foundation. A lot of people forget about this, but looking at your family and the business are all intertwined when you're doing agriculture, right? You live on the place, you work out there, it's all integrated, it's all kind of weave together as you're going through this, but you have to have some clear separations on this. So before you move into this, if you haven't already, we're just looking at making sure that you have your personal life, your financial and cultural responsibilities all kind of lined out ahead of time, so you know where you're at and your family knows where you're at. And the second part of this is just the where we're at, personal life. So we need to look at this. Do you have credit scores? What is it? What is your credit score? Going on and looking at that stuff. My personal debt, is it manageable? How much do you have of that? Who's it with? What type of debt is it? Those are the things you're going to be looking at there. Am I healthy and physically able to do this kind of business that I want to move forward and want to move into? And do you have a good support system? And support systems are real critical when you're getting into these business sides. Like Vicki, would you agree with that?
So absolutely. I think definitely what Trent said is probably one of the most important factors to consider when looking at starting this kind of endeavor. Without a support system, without a mentor to guide you, the challenges can seem insurmountable.
Yeah, I agree. So if we go to this next slide, thing when we talk about having a good credit score and having your finances and financial situation lined out in your personal life, it's, so we can go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is an article that was in the Salt Lake Tribune. Ruby was able to find this one. And look at this recent state of report on those payday loans, and the companies last charge an average of 522.26% interest rate. And there was one case, the highest one was 2,607% interest rate. Those are things you can't really handle. And if you're getting caught in that kind of stuff, there's no way you're going to be able to start a business to have a viable, strong business working in this, because this is as we go through this webinar and the next one, you'll see how impactful these interest rates are. And having an interest rate of 522% or even the 2,600, that might be an outlier, but still you're talking a huge amount of loan. And that was all $50 or $100 loan for 7 days. So
Yeah.
It really impacts you.
Yeah, and it impacts your progress and how quickly you're going to be able to take your next step into solvability. And so I think it's really important to realize that these are real numbers and it's out there. So hopefully through this webinar, we're going to show you the impacts of those. And so that when you're making these decisions, you're not making the quick decision or the easiest, but the best for your business.
Yeah, so we're moving on. We're going to look at your finance, remember, right now we're talking about some personal finance situation that you're in there. So do you have personal assets such as home savings that you're willing to risk? Because remember, as you're going into this business, these things are going to be at risk on you. It's going to be probably, you're going to be a sole proprietor starting off, individual on that. You're going to put some personal assets at risk on that. So you need to have an idea of what they are and label them and mark them out. Can I start a business without borrowing money? There's ways, sometimes you can do that. You can start by working on your savings, doing other things, but build up without having to borrow debt and avoid those interest charges that we were talking about on that. Then do you have family or partners willing to finance me either as a whole or a piece of it, or whatever component it might be and whatever they feel comfortable with, because they're going to be taking a risk on at the same time with that. There are some folks that say never bring a family necessarily into that. And I don't know what you think of that, Vicki.
No, I definitely think that's a huge risk to bring a family member in, but I do want to point out in part of this, do I have family or partners willing to finance me? That can include, like, if you're just trying to get in the cattle business, that could be just your mentor who is not your relation doing a cost share type of deal where you run their cows, and for every cow, every 10 cows you get 1 cow, and there's other ways to be doing.
Yeah, I agree. But it is something to think about, how that goes back to that relationship, how it is and where you're at with that. And once you get in business, those really need to be strong, those relationships that you're going through this one. And do I have a great relationship with the banker? So as you're going through this, because it's not going to end just up the front. Once you get going and you're developing this, there's going to be operating costs. There's going to be other unforeseen costs that pop up, which we'll be going over later on. And you need to have a backup and a way to handle those and manage them on a more even keel as you're going through the year.
And I think on this one, it's important to ask yourself if you have a relationship with a banker at all. A lot of our producers in Indian country don't have a banker. And so that's something we'll look at as well as we get to these end stages of, choosing funding options.
Yes.
And Trent and Vicki, I just want to say sometimes we're bringing that up because as you saw that payday loan, the payday loan is costing as much for a week of interest as it costs for maybe a whole year of interest if you have a bank loan and stuff. And so even if this might be something that's a little bit harder to do, or it takes a lot of time, I think as Vicki said, the most convenient one is maybe not the best one for your business. And so these are things that we want you to start looking at.
Absolutely. Agree.
Thanks, Ruby.
Okay, so the next one we're looking at is keeping financial records, because this is something else. If you don't already do it in a personal, you need to start getting a handle on it and start doing it in your personal life on where you're going, because you need to understand where your money's going. A lot of people don't. There's a lot of leakages, and there's a lot of other programs out there that kind of help you track these kind of things. It's just understanding where everything's going, so where your money's going. Next one, do I have the right have money right now? And that means in the bank, cash ready, that you can do something with without jeopardizing some other piece of the family, or the options on that. Okay. Will I have money tomorrow? So if I have an emergency expense pop up right now, is that going to drain me so I won't have any tomorrow or the next day on that? So you need to look at that. And look, will I have to borrow money? It goes back on that again. how much would you have to borrow? So you have to have that tracking to see where you're at on this. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is keeping financial records of your inflows and outflows, which we'll talk about in a little more detail later on in this PowerPoint. So how much is enough? I get this question a lot. I know a lot of people have been asked this, but it says, you want to end up, when we look at a record system, what we look at, we want to end up with a set of records that one can be maintained with available resources that you have, okay? So you don't have to go out and buy the biggest, fanciest type of a program or software. Just has with your available resources. It has to provide the information needed to make the best decisions for your operation and your household, okay? In this case, we're talking personal finance, so it could be on a household basis. You need to provide information that you need to make good decisions about the household and about the business that you're going through there. And by setting up your household first, you'll start making those decisions, and it'll make things a lot easier when you have these discussion points and you're tracking it all. So that less things come as a surprise, okay? And then it also tells a story, elements of the situation you're in. So you can track that. You can start to see where the money leakages are going and why that money is going there, and try to figure that out. So that's what you're trying to, that's what we want you to get through on this, to get on back on track with that.
And it's extremely important because there are many program opportunities out there, whether it's agriculture or an SBA loan, that you will not have the ability to participate in if you're not keeping some kind of records. So we can't stress this enough. You need to know where you're at, what's going on, when you did what.
Yep. So the next one, there should be a little quote over here, is everything that can be counted doesn't necessarily count, and everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. So we understand that there are things that you can't, it's hard to quantify, but you need to be aware of them. You need to know that they're there and be available to do that, but you may not be able to actually put a dollar directly on that. In some of these cases, especially when you're working with some of the cultural components that many of the tribal members would be working with. So keep that in mind, okay? Okay, with that, a while back, there's a group of us developed this Getting on Track as a rightrisk.org, and better manage it through basic ag records. But this applies to with just setting up, if you've never set up a record system before, there's about 5 easy steps you can do that. And the one thing is, first of all, is keep all income and expense receipts. So that's your paper trail. So you know what's going on, you know where things are going. Record all your transactions that you do. A lot of times with the debit cards these days, people aren't grabbing those kind of receipts or not seeing that. They say, well, I'll just get it off of the bank later on, and they forget about a lot of these little small charges that just kind of build up on you, okay? And then you want to be able to transfer these entries that you're doing on a daily basis onto a monthly ledger. So it's a little easier to read, and it's grouped into categories that are a little more digestible to what you're doing on there. Okay, and then you want to estimate your cash flow. From that, over a year, you could be able to see where your money's going in and out over the year, and you want to be able to estimate that for the following year, see where you're at on that. Then you'll be able to analyze it a lot clearer there when you have the categories you need and what's going on with that, and be able to just track that as you're going through there and start to look at that flow. Where are my big leakages in that? Okay, so cash flow, a key financial record. It's pretty straightforward. This is a basic one. Excuse me. Typically, when we're looking at a cash flow, we start with the income on top. This is just a case. Again, we're looking at Paul and Suzanne's salary. So we're putting that in there. Here's a fixed amount that they have, and here's a monthly amount. So they might get an annual, it might be whatever it might be, their payment. And then there's some monthly payments that could fluctuate, right? Because sometimes you're doing different jobs, and sometimes you'll have more income one month and less the other. So yeah, that's fine. You just need to be able to track it, but note whether it's a monthly or it's a fixed amount. So, and then you just annualize it, total those up, and you'll see what's coming in on both sides, fixed, monthly, and then you'll have your annual total over there. So you don't want to make this harder than it really needs to be on this one. So then we go over the next one is we start on our expenses after we get all our income captured on the top, and we start rolling down on the same categories, fixed monthly, and then we want to do a summary of the total annual expenditures over there. But we use these basic categories, and what we're using on some of these basic categories is what you'd see in the tax forms. Okay, and I know some of our tribal members may not do tax forms. You would on the 1040 in some of these cases, and it's changed slightly there. But these are some of the core basic expenses that you're going to see on there: food, meals, rent, medical care if you have that, health insurance if you have that, household, excuse me, household supplies that just every day running the household itself, cleaning supplies, that kind of stuff, clothing for you, your kids, your whole household there, personal care, child care if you have that. And again, think back to that family, what we're talking about, the family connections, and where you, if you are paying for that, maybe there's ways that you can minimize some of these other ones. Education, if you're taking the educational courses, and if you're do some recreation, going to the movies, things like that, you want to be sure you track those. And they're infrequent, that's fine, but you still want to be able to track them, okay? And then your utilities for sure. Renter's insurance if you're renting. If you otherwise, if you have a, you know, we'll get down here if you have some other ones. Life insurance if you have that as well, and then your vehicle fuel repairs and maintenance. Now this is not the loan payment on the vehicle. This is the maintenance of those vehicles. So, you know, the gas and everything that takes to get going, to maintain it and get around town, get around the ranch. That's what we're looking for on that. And then your household repair, you know, if you have a storm come through, or like Vicki just said, they had some pretty nasty storms recently. You know, you get some hail, you get some, now we have fire down here in Arizona, but yeah. Anything you want to add to the expenses, Vicki, on that?
I just want to point out that there's a real propensity to skimp on these because you want
Yeah.
to feel like it's not going to be as expensive as it is, or you're not spending as much as you are, but you have to take a really honest look at your expenses and put the actual in here. This is not an estimated, this is an actual that you can track by your financial records, because this one spreadsheet right here kind of lays out your year for you and whether or not you're going to be able to make your business payment, whether that's a cow payment or you know, a different kind of business payment, you know, depending on what you're choosing to do.
Right.
And I just wanted to point out here that we're doing this for the family because the farm and family are so intertwined. So we want to start with the family. But the same process would be for the livestock operation too. We would just have some different categories here, like feed for the animals, your rent for your pasture, you know what I mean, your other grazing and things like that. But the process is the same. And so if you get used to doing it with your family, it's much easier to do it for the farm or the ranch or the livestock operation also.
Yeah, absolutely. It's what we want you to do is start creating that habit of tracking all these. And it takes a little bit to get used to, you know, to grab your receipts. Sometimes what I do at the house is I have a little basket in the office. So anybody that's in my household that has receipts, they just come home and they dump it in the basket. And then I'll go through there, usually in the evening, and I have a glass of tea or something, and I'm sitting down and I just enter all of those receipts and put them in a category they need to be. It's just a habit that I get into, and it really helps, so I know exactly where I'm at all times. Okay, so the next one, what we're looking at is continuing on some of the expenses over here. Is personal income tax and FICA if you have that, if you have an employee, if you're doing any kind of these things, you're going to have some other taxes in there, and you may not have a whole lot. So you really, you know, that's why this one's blank. You know, we're not looking at this necessarily because it doesn't impact this household at this time. Loan payments. This is if you had a mortgage, car loans, you can put as many as you want in there. Student loans, if you have that. Credit cards are in there. And you can break out the credit cards to the individual credit cards if you want, so you know exactly on each credit card what's going on there and how much. And you really, if you have the credit cards and all the student loans on these, you really have to have an understanding of the interest rates associated with each one of those as you're moving through this and you're working through that. Because again, you don't want to get caught by these interest rates and the changes and the variable interest rates changing on that. And you don't want to get caught on some of these higher interest rates that you'd be doing. Okay, so your net cash flow is at the end of it. So you come down there, here's your total income. You get your total living expenses. You're just summing up each of those columns as you're going through there. You got your loan payments, and then you just subtract off. You have your positives on top. That's all the money coming in. You subtract all the money that's going out on the bottom, and whatever you have left is the net. And you notice under the fixed one, we have $1,300 to the good. And then on the monthly expenses, we went down to negative 900. Well, people say, well, I can't go negative on your expenses, you know, our income coming in, how can we cover anything? Well, when you look over at the annual totals, you take that 1,300 in there and you start rolling that in there, you'll be able to cover this, okay? But you want to track that. So your total income over there, the annual is 51, and that's, if we were to expand it out on there, it would show the other columns on that. And then you roll it down there and that would be your in net cash flow would be $4,800. So that's what we're showing on there is the annual one. So that would be inclusive of all the months where you just see 1 month in here as a sum. So we're trying to simplify it on that. Okay. Any, did I miss something on there that you think are important, guys? No questions coming in? Okay.
Nope.
Good. So again, this is a,
I think it went too fast. There we
Yeah.
go.
I think we go up one more there. Yeah. So this is just a way of looking at what you just did in a spreadsheet format, okay? Some people are more visual learners though. So what you do on here is the money inflow. So you take off the lid to your water bottle and all your income is pouring in there, right? So you're pouring in there, pouring in your income, and it gets you a level in the tank of where you're at. And then as you start to pay for things, you hit that, so you take a cup here, you take a cup there, you take a half a gallon over here for something else. And eventually that water level is going to be going up and down, right? So that's what you're trying to get at is this monthly flows. So when you get down to the next one, go ahead. So we want more to flow in than we want to flow out. Okay, that's what we're trying to do. So you just want to, if you're really leaking, you're drinking a lot of water out of this particular tank, you need to put more water in it at a larger rate than what's coming in there. So you want it to be fairly balanced between more positive coming in, less going out, but you are going to have ongoing expenses. So it's not going to be zero. Okay, so we want to be aware of that too. Let's talk about some of the types of expenses again. There's the known expenses. We went over some of those up there. You expected every month with somewhat predictable amounts. They can fluctuate. Loan payments, utilities, rents, insurance. And there are ways even on utilities and some of these others where you can make them a little more predictable. And a lot of utility companies will do a kind of like an averaged rate for you so it's consistent over time. And that's something you'd have to explore in your area that you're at and talk with your utilities company, see if that's possible, if that's something that you think would be better from a managing standpoint of what you're doing on there. So you don't have a bigger swing in those kind of expenses. Okay. So, you know, the other one are known but variable expenses. So you know you're going to buy food, you know you're going to buy gas, you know you're going to buy clothing, and you're going to do some entertainment. And just what level you're going to do that varies a lot. Sometimes you go out to eat, sometimes you just stay home and you cook more. So it would be more groceries rather than the dining. Dining's a lot more expensive to eat out. Okay, gas, sometimes you're sitting at home, especially if you're starting up a business in cows, you want to separate that, remember. So when you start tracking gas for the business relative to what the personal is, maybe you're not driving around as much, taking kids back and forth to school in the summertime. So maybe that backs it off some on there. So those are things to think about, are a little more variable. And there's some hidden expenses. And those are the ones that are not expected. Of course, car repairs is one of the classic ones on that, right? You don't know when the battery's going to die or when the radiator is going to explode. Right now, my porch says it's 115. And so it's a bit of a stress on some of the vehicles and some of the radiators and things like that. So you need to be aware of that. Medical bills, those happen infrequent. You not really expecting them. Light bulbs, tickets, legal fees. Tickets, we mean like if you're speeding, those kind of things that you're going to get involved with there. And interest rates, of course, we put on there. Then there's cultural expenses, as you guys understand this. There's the money, time, and effort going in to the supporting of the community and the cultural needs of the community itself. It's not just a one to family on this. If you have to donate some time, donate some materials to the community, you need to account for that. That's fine. It's important to have, but you need to account for those as you go through there. Okay, trade-offs. So reaching your goal while meeting your needs. That's what you're looking at this. It's just a trade-off. Again, go back to the jar with the water coming in, going out. You're trading off how much, maybe I don't need to drink 2 glasses of water a day. There's something I could cut back. And I could cut back a half a glass or a full glass and just do 1. Okay, so you're going out versus staying in eating. I hit on that a little bit last time. Going out to eat is more expensive, where if you're going to make stuff yourself and learn to cook and these kind of things, you can really reduce your cost or your outflows going in that way. Pay bills on time versus paying late with fees and interest rates. Again, we go back on the interest rates, but paying things late is really going to ding you in the long run on that. And there's also dings the credit score that you'll be doing on that you'll be looking at on that. And then keeping a positive balance in the checking versus paying overdraft fees. I know this one hits a lot, and sometimes it's hard to do because if you're not used to managing the cash flow, you get caught every now and then. But those little glitches on there, and paying those overdraft fees can really eat into you a lot, especially if you're checking them like once a month at the bank and not really following and tracking where you're going on it. And it becomes more of a surprise, right? So reducing expenditures versus increasing income. That's all what we're trying to do here. You just want to figure out, where am I spending a lot of money and do I really need to spend it on that? Okay, that's just what we want you to get a better handle on this before we move forward.
And I don't think you need to do it all at once. I mean, we want to keep track of everything, but don't feel like you have to get it really detailed on everything all at once. Or, you know what I mean? If you missed a receipt and you can't find it, you know what I mean? Still go forward with what you can do. And as you keep doing it, it's going to get easier and you're going to get better at it. So just doing something, I think, helps you with that.
And there's a really good point with this as well, is that this is not only, just for your expenditures and your financial health, it's for your emotional or mental health, because
oh yeah,
stressed out you get because you're behind or because you're not keeping up or you're overdrafting, that takes a toll on your mental health as well. And you're starting to worry about things kind of like that water tank. Your tank's getting empty because you're too worried about the wrong things. So when you start keeping up on this stuff, it affects your ability to focus on the things that need your focus.
Yeah. And I would also, under that same thing, is your spouse needs to be involved with this. You guys the family needs to be on the same page to make this really solid. Okay? Because if you're not on the same page and one's doing expenditure, not counting it, you have to be on the same page. But Ruby's right as well. You don't have to get it all done at once. It's going to take some time. If you haven't done this before, it takes some adjustment, and you're not going to get everything right the first time, but eventually you will. You'll get there, and the habits will be better, and you'll start moving forward on it, and you'll be a lot less stress at the household too if you start having that positive influence on where your money's going all the time. You really want to reduce that and get rid of that added stress to the family by doing its unexpected expenses and minimizing those flows. Okay. So the next one is with just an exercise. So you can go to your cash flow and target 1 or 2 of the items. This is just to get started once you start working through it. And we also have, there could be a lot of forms and templates that you can use on some of the websites. We'll have links on there that you can download for easy cash flows. If you like doing those, the spreadsheets, there's other tools available for sure. So just, it has to fit your needs and what you like to do it. So, but just go through, look at your cash flow and target 1 or 2 items that you would adjust to improve your cash flow, and see how that works over, a couple of months, 3 or 4 months, and see the difference if that water level rises a bit on there. Is what we're looking at. Okay, maybe you have to go get an extra job or part-time job on there, so you can maybe move through there and see how much that would fill it up if you have time for it. So those are things that you'd be looking at on that. Okay, this is also a big one. And this goes back to those unexpected expenses, and some of the others is understanding the wants versus needs. Once you are currently possession working well and serving a purpose, you must have a new car, latest phone, subscription, online music, game, clubs, etc. So those are wants, right? Needs are the essentials to maintain healthy family and your job. That's food, clothing, income, medicines, utilities. Those are essential things that you have to have for that household. Again, going back to the wants, those are just new car. You don't need a new car, right? You can get by with something less than that. Latest phones, even that older phone, my teenage son has had a phone. He's had the same phone now for like 6-7 years, and it's working fine. So those things, you don't always feel the pressure jumping in to getting a new one every time. You want to control some of those wants, right? And focus on what the needs are and look at that.
Because all of that correlates to how quickly your business becomes successful and gets ahead. And then once it gets ahead, then maybe you can get the latest phone, but sometimes you have to make those sacrifices so that you're paying the bills and being able to get ahead.
That's right.
Yeah, I think also will give an opportunity for them to invest in the future and see how much money they have available to expand their operations.
Yeah, and as we're going through these next several webinars, we're going to be looking at that, looking at savings. If you were to pull off another $20, $40, $50 and put it into a savings or something else, what would that look like? And you can work with your kids on this too, so to get them involved and get them working on that as well. Okay, so we've gone over expenses, we've looked at the wants and the needs, we looked at some other things. So what's the next step we're going to do is you're going to have to create a plan. Okay, you're going to do assessment of your current progress and situation. You're going to have to be able, you want something to get metrics of which to track your progress on that. So you need to create a plan for this. You need to analyze assessment to see what needs work, prioritize goals with plan to achieve them, and then review your plan, develop a list of additional help that you're going to need on there. Because as you go through this, say, well, I don't understand how to do this. There's people out there and things that can help you do this. So you're not on your own for this. And remember, you have that family support and other things to get going through this. So there's a lot of other resources out there to help you, so you never feel like you're alone in this thing, okay?
And it's important on this, these don't have to be a whole paragraph. It may be one word. It may be, I need to look at this. I don't know. I mean, that's all starting to create your plan. You don't have to know all the answers. You don't have to know all your needs yet. But as you start identifying them, then you're going to start to realize maybe the answer to the next one as well.
Yeah. So the first part you're going to do on this is, after you're creating your plan, is analyze your assessment. Based off the assessment, make a list of what could be improved in your current situation, okay? How much money will it take each month to make that improvement? Look at all your goals, determine how much money each would take per month. Make a list within monthly amounts, and then analyze your budgets to see how much is available to use for both debit, possibly restructuring. There's a lot of those restructuring options available that you could do as you're going through some of these. And even if you have a lot of that in hand, maybe you're going to have to up your savings a little bit more to put that forth, like we talked about earlier. Okay. But then next, what we're going to do is prioritize your goals. So if the amount needed for all the goals is more than is available, then I talked about that before, you're going to have to do something different, right? You're going to have to go get another job, or go do something, you cut some more, or you just options, or see if you can get some more funds in there. You will need to prioritize your goal, because that's your ultimate objective, is to meet your goals as you get into the business, as you're going through there, and as a household itself. Okay, so what's most important to you right now and your family is where you're going. If you try doing too many things at once, and Ruby alluded to this earlier, you may not achieve any of them. Because, and I see this a lot in other record systems as they're setting up, is people jump to the most fanciest, most detailed record system around there, and then they only use a quarter of it, or they get frustrated with it. It's too much for them at once, and they just get overloaded and they abandon it before they even get started on it. You don't want to do that. You want to ease into it like we've been talking about. You want to get a handle on it for sure, but you want to make sure that it fits your needs and you continue to roll and you kind of grow with it, okay? And then as you're growing and as you're getting better at it, you will know, oh, I need this information now. So maybe then you'll start adding more to it, but you'll do it at a pace that makes sense to you and that you can handle instead of trying to do it all at once, okay? And work on what determines the most important. You will be more motivated. And actually, if you start knocking off one or two of your debts, that's going to be a lot more motivational to you as you start seeing a couple of these things getting ticked off and going in there and actually setting a goal and making a goal. That's going to give you more energy and a lot more power to keep moving forward on that. Okay. And then once you achieve that particular goal, then you can work on setting the next one. What's that next level you want to do? So set the bar and keep it going, keep that momentum moving through you and your family as you're going through this, keeping your eye on the end of where you really want to be, okay? And you'll have to do it, like I mentioned again, you don't have to do everything at once. However, try to make progress monthly.
Really make sure you write these down. It's really mental, so that when you're achieving one and you get to cross that off, I mean, there's a part of this that is so mental. So don't just be thinking this specific one in your head. Again, it doesn't have to be extensive, but you know, even if you write down 2 goals and you achieve both of those in 2 months, I mean, you'll start to feel that momentum that Trent is talking about, because you will be watching yourself achieve those, marking them off your list, and you'll start being able to look back at how much you've accomplished.
Yep. So develop a plan to achieve your goals. So modify both your budget and your goals and create a plan that will work for you. That's after you're assessing, and we were going through there earlier, prioritizing the goals, you know, which ones are most important, and then kind of ranking them through there. Review the trade-offs as we talked about earlier. What are those trade-offs? Can they be changed now, right? Because maybe you're doing something slightly different. You achieved a couple extra goals in there that you had marked earlier, and now some of those early trade-offs may be gone, or there are new trade-offs that have arose. So you need to be able to modify and change that as we go in there. To have more money for your goals and either needs, spend less on something. We talk about it a lot, but it's important. And then modify your budget for that, so you can see where you're at on that, or you can earn more income, as I've talked about before. There's 2 ways that system works: the money coming in, the water coming in on the top, and coming out the bottom. So you're trying to find that balance and try to fill up that jar as best you can.
Trent?
Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to point out here is by going through and keeping track of your expenses and your income and everything that we've talked about and prioritizing those goals, it's also, you may be spending less on something that you don't want as much to be able to spend more on something that you do want.
Yeah.
And so sometimes it can just make us more thoughtful with what we're spending. So we're really having what we spend aligning with what we want to have really spend that money on and what we want to prioritize.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so if you just keep modifying them, take a longer to achieve them, it'll cost you less per month. There's just ways to just stay on track. Remember, keep that vision in there where you want to be on this and where the family wants to be. That's important as you're moving through this. Okay. And we've hit on this on several times, to just review your plan often. I mean, are your goals attainable and reasonable? If you're setting the highest thing right off the bat, you don't want to do that. You need something that you can tick off that is going to give you that momentum as you're rolling through. It's really hard to just say, I'm going to get everything done in 1 year on this. It depends on your situation, but it's unlikely that you're going to achieve that right away. So you need to do that. You really need, can you stick to your budget? That it's hard. If you haven't done it before, it's a psychological thing in a lot of ways. It's really hard to break that old spending financial habit that you have. It takes support and it takes persistence to do it. and you really have to be focused on it. And that's where having the family on the same page and feeling that strength between them really helps on that, okay? And then is it a doable over time? So you want to make sure that, of course, that you can get there and you can do this, right? And you're going to have to track your progress. So how will you track your progress? Is going to be on the calendar. Vicki, you use a calendar, right?
So yeah, I put everything on just a regular calendar. That's the big one. And that way I know what was paid when, and then it's very easy for me to go back to it. I have not yet transferred over to electronic, but I have all my expenses at all time and it still works good. So you don't have to go spend all the money on a system that you only use 10% of.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, it's important that system, again, works for you and still tracks things. One of the nice things about the calendar approach, like what Vicki does there, is everybody knows where that calendar is. So the family can go up there and say, oh yeah, we got this expense coming up, so we need to think about what we're going to be doing on there. So everybody would be on the same page with that. Where if you have it in a computer system, they can go in there and log in, but what's the likelihood of somebody else coming in there and logging on that, right? Because I know in my particular case here, that's not the case, that they come in and log in all the time and track it. I do make a point to have tell them kind of where we're at on stuff, but that is nice to get a system that works for you and your family on that. Really gets them involved.
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, Juan.
Yeah, there are other options of it. Talking about calendar. You can share calendars within Google Docs, Word document,
Yeah,
Outlook.
Yep.
Anyone can have access to this. So they can see the progress of what needs to be invested in, paid for. Everyone can see that. It's just something that can be shared. They don't have to really log in. They can just click a link.
Yeah, and the same thing so that I can be utilizing USDA programs. Again, I'm not using anything fancy. I have a book that we do all our counting in, and USDA uses all our numbers. We just screenshot them and send them in. You can see here, we did it on a cardboard box, and because I had forgot my book, so then I just taped it in there. But our point is it doesn't have to be difficult. It doesn't have to be expensive. Just start somewhere.
I agree. And there's plenty of help out there. Again, I want to reiterate that there's plenty of good programs, good assistance out there for this and to work through and get you started and get going on it. But really important that it fits you, it fits your system, your life, and where you want to be with it, okay? Otherwise, you're just not going to use it.
So
Okay,
what are
there's other
some,
career counseling.
where are some places they could go to get help?
Well, a lot of times there's personal finance programs out there. There's a lot of help on from the banks. There's a lot of programs available on both calendars. And you know, part of it too, when you start talking about counseling, there's small business development would be do some of these things. There's a lot of nonprofits that offer some pretty good financial training, even with, in particular for the tribal, you know, there's a lot of even CDFIs that are tribal focused. I mean, so you don't have to go off nation necessarily to find a lot of this stuff. You can find it within your communities, the right people working with the tribal extension agents who have access to some of these things and broader. Those are where you can go to really try to get a sense of, okay, it's on my nation, I can work with it. There are people here that have expertise. I think Vicki, you have a lot of that up there, right?
Yeah, and I was just going to say, for us, we are really lucky because our county USDA offices are very active. And so for us, all our records are just kept in a county office because they help us participate in so many programs. You know, during COVID, they just had the CFAP program, and all we had to do was verify some information. And because we just have this really strong relationship with the FSA office there,
Yeah.
the local farm service agency office right on the reservation, it took a matter of 10 minutes to get that application done and get them the information they needed. So this is all buildable, but, you know, depending on, you know, if you're using someone like Juan with FERTEP or, you know, your FSA offices, you know, you can build that with someone so that your information is all in one spot. Your bank also does it. Where's my CAF checks? Where, you know, how much was it? How much was my lease payment this year? I mean, there's numerous resources that will be keeping this information as well.
And I think you'll be hearing more about some of these other options as you go down the road. When you start really looking into it, you'll start seeing some of these, some of the options. And certainly, if you have any questions at all, you can call any one of us, and we can point you in the right direction, help you get started with that. Okay, changing your plan over time, because like we said, as you're moving forward, things are going to be changing. COVID's a perfect example of that, right? We didn't see this coming. It really substantially changed. A lot of things are going on, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to derail you. If you're prepared for it and you're working with it, you're looking at different programs and how you can do this. Things change. It always will. One thing that's consistent is change will happen. And that's what you need to be aware of. And you just, how you face it, what you're doing with it, that's what you're focused on. So that's where you want to be. Family changes at any time between willing to adjust. You just have to keep focused where you're at. Okay, we can deal with this. You might have to back off one of your things once in a while to handle something like that. It doesn't mean it goes away, but it means you back it off for a little bit and then you come back at it later on when you handle some of these other changes that go with that. Okay. Savings goal. This is always a good one. Really like to start with your kids on this too, is to get them involved with it and really understand savings versus, purchasing these things, what we'll get into later there for sure. Now, reasons to save, and just have that safety net or this emergency fund in case those kind of unforeseen things happen there, like the radiator blows up on your car. You don't have to go out to one of those payday loan or one of the other loan kind of things with a higher interest rate. You would have some kind of savings buffer to go out there and be able to handle a large portion of it or all of it that you'd have on there and sort of build those up, okay? Unexpected expenses, medical, job loss, just kind of where you're going, where you're at with that. And there's different metrics people use on how much of a safety net I really need. And a lot of them use depends on how figures you want to be on there, 6 to 10 months of total expenses for your household is what they look at sometimes, putting in as savings as having that buffer. Is that what you guys are? Ruby, you worked on some of that as well, on having how big the emergency fund has to be, or safety net on that.
I think it depends. Some people talk about initially just having $1,000 or $500 that you can use for things and then working your way up. Like we said before, not everything's going to come over night, but it's just about making little progress. It depends on how secure your income is. If you have a really secure income and you know what it's going to be, then maybe you only need a couple of months of a safety net. But if you're self-employed or like a ranching situation where it can really be up and down between the years, you might want to have a bigger safety net there. And so it just kind of depends, but maybe make that part of your goals. You know what I mean? It's something that you can work towards over time, I think.
Yeah.
And I want to add on here that it's really important as well for the cultural aspect of this, because as we all know, as tribal members, we may have somebody have a great success or somebody passes away. And so this is where, if you just have that little nest egg, to help put on that feed, or maybe you're having to give a beef or, different things like that. This is where this is important, so that you can know how much you can contribute and also have that there so that you're, supporting, your other tribal members as well.
Yeah. And the other parts on the savings goal could be for retirement, it could be educational funds, it could be all those, right? You're just prioritizing where you're at and at your given stage in life and where your family's at and what's going on. Each one of these would roll in importance, okay? So savings for the planned annual expenses, we were talking about that. If you do a vacation, annual property taxes, some of those big expenses that are coming once a year, you can start to save up so you have that money ready and you can attack it right away. Car registration, annual medical expenses, add up how much you'll need. You'll have that at the cash flow. You'll get those statements at the end of how much actually you'll need on that, and you can just start to try to put away a certain percent of that every month and get you at that goal that you're going to meet that one expense. The one way to do it is just divide it by 12. So you have a monthly portion of what you need to do that. So it doesn't have to be rocket science on that, but you do need to stick with it. and hitting on a couple of these expenses like we're going to talk about here, just as maintaining financial health when unexpected things happen. Talk about the amount needed varies. In this case, we talked if you're self-employed. I think Ruby just mentioned that. You may need a large one, general 3 to 9 months is here, but I tend to go 6 to 10, somewhere in there. So it just varies, but add up all your monthly bills as well as your living expenses. So this is getting at that annual one, so you know exactly where you're at overall, what that bucket of water actually holds, where it's at on there, and all your expenses, how many cups have been coming out of there. And in this example, Bill and Carol make $4,000 per month. Their monthly expenses are $3,500. If they want a 6-month emergency fund, they will need $21,000. Okay, that's just simple math on that one. So your savings goal, what you're trying to get on that is just characteristics of this goal is it needs to be realistic. Don't think you're going to save $100,000 in the first year or what you're going to be doing. Make it reasonable on these. It has to be attainable and it has to be measurable. So you need to be in that account, something you're not going to touch. Keep it pulling it away. A lot of folks like to just pull it out or have it pulled out automatically if you have direct deposit or not. Or if not, it's fine. You just pull 20 or 40 out and you put it in a separate area where you don't see it, right? And you know it's there, but you just don't see it and you don't have it readily available. You want to put it off to the side in there to make it. Bad go, become a movie star. Well, depends on that, but if that's your overall goal, you're going to be working pretty hard to get that, and the odds are pretty tough on that one. So good goals is get a better job, increase my net income by 10%, get promotions at work. You know, when you've been on a crew for a while, maybe you become supervisor as a crew, and just kind of working through the system on that. Okay, here's some my savings goal examples. The short-term goals: buy a new car, that's 2 years roughly, could be a little longer than that. Pay off all of my credit cards. Pay off my credit cards are one. That could be a year, could be more. It depends on how many credit cards you have on there. So replace the furnace, or with maybe like a solar furnace or something, so you don't have to add expenses on the wood and everything. So that could be a year or more. Go on a family vacation if you haven't done that, or a larger one, or it could be for graduation too. You want to take somebody there. Also set up a 9-month emergency fund for that could take up to 2 years. It could be any length you want on that. It's $21,000. It could be even more on that. Okay. Long-term goal: college education funds, retirement planning. That could be 30 years or longer. Supporting aging parents. This is really important too, because those are things that you need to take into account as your income comes in, or as you're adjusting to where you're going to be. And that could impact your retirement as well as college funds when you're balancing out with supporting the aging parents. So it has to be part of that planning process that you're working through when you do that. And then your own long-term healthcare expenses. Think about your health and your family's health, your spouse's health as you're going through this, because that's your support system. So you need to be able to work with that. Okay. So last part I think we're going to add on this before we go to some questions is just how accessible should it be, your money. Remember I talked about hiding it away a little bit on there. Think about what your savings for. Because a lot of folks, if they don't have like an automatic withdrawal on your paycheck that goes into a savings account, or just when you do get paid, you just take in that chunk away, put it somewhere in a safe or someplace in the house, or easy accessible, but it's not earning any interest there, because interest can be good too if it's working for you, right? You just want it on your side, not against you. So those are things we're looking at. And do you need access to it? Is it going to be in savings for a longer period of time? Then that gets kind of, are you going to be locking it up with like CDs and these kind of things, where it's actually, you can't touch it for a certain length of time, okay? Is it going to be in a savings long period? We touched that. And how much do you have? So what are you starting with now? Where are you going to be on that one? If you want ready access to emergency fund, you can keep it in the bank. It's a lower interest rate again, but it's an interest rate that's on your side, as opposed to quick loans and other loans where that's against you. So that's what we mean about better income, better interest rates on that. And if you're saving for retirement and the money will be in savings for a long time, eventually you want to invest in stock markets. Mutual funds are really good on that, allow you to invest in one fund, investing maybe many different stocks. This is spreading out. That's all a mutual fund is, right? It's made up of a multitude of different stocks on there. And you can invest in that as a longer term one that's going to kind of be locked up now. It is subject to the market, so it's going to kind of be rolling a little bit. But that's okay because the returns over time on a lot of mutual funds and markets is well worth investing in there. And you will get returns on that. But it is a risk, okay? So you have to be aware of that. And it has to think long-term when you're doing that.
So I think that we're about out of time, but this was only part one for today. And so we're going to be back here on Facebook Live in just a few minutes with the second part of today's webinar on is going to be how to calculate some of the numbers and the loans and interest and all of those things, and really kind of give you some using an app. We have an application that's free on iOS or Google Play. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. So keep putting the questions in if you have any of those, and we'll continue to answer those.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.